It's a beautiful day for science. Currently, it looks like we just got hit by that second CME or an additional CME. It's kind of hard to tell exactly because we have a lot of ICMEs that are occurring in very repetitious form. But we are being impacted by another ICME. The proton event has escalated. Looks almost like there are two ICMEs that have occurred over the past several hours that we are seeing impacts of. The BZ also has switched to the negative, so we are looking at seeing a little more of that geomagnetic impact. And the, just had another M class flare just recently, M2.2. Thank you, Sydney. And we are going to take a look at that. I can tell from what we can see already what's occurring. This is going to be more of that positive leading and positive central area. The negative portion there, both are reacting as the reduction of this positive center is, well, essentially eradicated. So let's make this a little bit bigger. I've been waiting for this to occur, and I waited a long time last night waiting for it to occur. It never happened. But once again, the sun does things on its own timing. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Maheen and Sydney and DeepQuake9 and Ken and to all of you wonderful people. Let's see, what do we have here? And currently, let's switch to 171 angstroms. I want to see what this looks like on the loops. On the loop. All right. And let's slow it down a little bit. And here we go. Oh, not yet on there. Okay, gotcha. SDO has not updated their video content yet, which is fine. I'll be making this in addition to the video I'm working on anyways, which will be coming out. But for now, we can look at GOES 171. Not as good resolution, but much more frequently updated, which is nice. And that will give us what we need. All right. Let's take a look at what is going on. Okay, yeah, so we're definitely going to see another event. That's what I wanted to see. It didn't actually resolve much. We have that twisting of loops that's still there, both on the tail end, which that did resolve some of those right there. That event was one of the events I was looking for in specific type and location. And we can see where some of those tail loops that are connecting between 3297 and 3296 are actually being reacted right there. And that they're tightly wound. But there's still a lot of that inner loop activity on 3296 that's still not quite resolved and very dysfunctional, as it were. And there's no room for growth. There's no room for organization. So it's either going to have to create a flare or an eruption, or both. And so while we're looking at that, let's take a look at HMIBC. And that's going to show us the current polar magnetic environment that's going on that surface. HMIBC. Yeah. All right. And yes, indeed, that these series of events we've been seeing over the past, day have basically resolved the strong positive umbra that was over here. Now we see it's basically dispersed. It's all a bunch of weak positive. There's some stronger points, but overall it's no longer as concentrated. That was a big contributor of a lot of these stronger events that we were seeing. And this actually means a reduction of potential, but not by much. So the looking for those proton events, looking for these high solar flare events. We never did get the X class. There still is a potential for it, but the potential is decreasing the more the region is resolving its conflicted polar makeup, as it were. And let's take a look at what 1600 looks like, which will point out once again that that particular area has indeed become much more stable overall. That's not saying much, considering it still is quite chaotic, which is beautiful and all. All right, let's take a look at what HMIBC shows over the last 48 hours, and this will give us a good view of what I'm talking about as well. All right, come on, load. Waiting for it to load. There you go. All right, you'll see that strong umbra forms. Most of it goes and takes the lead, but the bottom portion forms its own umbra, and then it takes it apart. As it takes apart that strong umbra location, the weaker umbra, a weaker plage area rather, less concentrated, begins to disperse and spread out, and we end up with a rather significant change overall, where the concentrated magnetic field lines of positive leading areas are no longer being focused on the southern end of 3296, but is now becoming a little more stable and is actually in the forward leading area. But that the fact that it is now bumping up against 3297, and 3296 and 3297 is now one long active region, as opposed to having that small gap where the two negative areas were still forcing some separation. This adds another potential level of a different kind. So now we're seeing the potential of 3297 increase, and in reaction to 3296, but don't really know what to expect of that just yet. I do expect more flaring, of course, but overall it's continuing what's going to be a more stable overall environment, being that it's got that striation pattern where it's giving for the loops to go in such a way they're not going to cross as much. When you see these positives intermingled, surrounded, and you have the positive and negatives that are, it's like red versus blue. When you're surrounded, there's going to be some fighting, like this tail end of the positive, and how this positive here was basically surrounded by the north and slightly east and west. And so we're going to see a little more reaction whenever you see these regions have polarity of the opposite around them in a more surrounding method. And we have that in many different ways, but in all it is less so, mostly because it is more of a proper disposition. However, due to the amount of time it's taken to change 3296, we're seeing that 3297 still has that leading negative field that has been developed in response to its constant reactions with 3296, and that is diminished slightly, but not by a whole lot. It's still there. So I expect that to be more reactive as well, and that is actually the event I've been looking for mostly, is the loops that are connecting between where 3296's positive areas and this weaker field of 3297. And we saw part of that happen in this most recent M class, but it is not fully resolved. I do expect another, quite possibly M class. Their X class is still possible, and there is still a high chance of a proton event to occur once again. Probably not as high as it was. I believe NOAA reduced it by 40% last I looked, which was last night, from what it was previously. However, we have a whole series of proton events that have been occurring, and yeah, thank you, Sydney. Yeah, I was about to say, we're probably going to see a couple of surges of that proton flux throughout the day, and this may be going on for a short while. There are two different types of proton events. This is something I've newly learned. I've been looking for a lot of data on this for a while now, and I started hyper-focusing on this over the past series of days because we were actually seeing the impacts of the proton events in two unique ways. And what made me super excited and why I was up all last night and working on this video and everything is because I was too exhilarated to rest. I learned something that I've been trying to discover for a long time and hyper-focused on over the past few days. And Dr. Skov, Tamitha Skov, thanks to her, I've been able to figure it out. She explained it to me in a really eloquent, short answer that gave me everything I needed to be able to go from. And since from that, getting the proper terminology I needed that I was lacking, as well as a better understanding, I was able to find a full paper from NASA on it as well. And it describes it. It's like finding pure gold. Gold of knowledge. Knowledge gold. And this activity, so what we're seeing is both kinds of these proton events are impacting us. And that is what makes this so unique and interesting. Now, it happens often during the solar maximum. In fact, the paper refers to it as we see a proton event during a high point of activity from the sun, sometimes as frequent as every day. But it's not typically very powerful to where it causes a raise like we see right now. We still get increases and there's still fluctuations, but right now it's a little bit more than typical, as we are still above that red line there, but it's still only an S1. We didn't even get close to an S2 from what I can tell, so that's a good sign. That aside, so the two different types of proton events we have are the one from the initial burst of an event, and this is going to be, let me go ahead and pull up 304 on GOES, and if you look, you'll see when a surface event occurs and you get a lot of those protons expelled with the reaction of a powerful solar flare, the flare shoots light out, travels 8 minutes 20 seconds approximately for that 93 million miles from the sun to the earth, and that is one of the types of proton events. The protons that are traveling have a greater chance of spreading out a little bit, becoming less powerful in its initial collision, but it's a little bit longer of a duration, and so we have a slower onset. It gets here sooner, slower onset, slower decrease, and a prolonged overall event. That's one type. We've been seeing that, and that's going to be from your burst, your initial burst explosive event, just rapidly shooting out the protons from the sun. Now, the other kind is a proton event that occurs from a significant eruption or solar flare that also is associated with a CME. These are three different types of events, all three unique independent events that, when put together, create a beautiful storm of what we are seeing right now. And we have, so the event occurred, we had a solar flare, we had a significant CME, became an ICME, interplanetary coronal mass ejection. This ICME also had a proton event attached to its front shock wave. So as an ICME occurs, it's a lot of force to get that solar energy off the sun. And you can see how powerful this M-class is. You can see a lot of plasma motion here. And that's because there's a constant surface change, and that plasma is being shoved around all the way at the surface of the photosphere to resolve its complex polarity, that red versus blue that's going on. And so what happens is, instead of getting that proton event out and ahead, traveling really fast, it gets tied in with that shock wave, because protons, just like the ICMEs, they're all charged. They're all electromagnetically charged. So the protons get enraptured and sort of create their own helix formation in front, leading that ICME. They can spread a good distance ahead of the ICME, but it's almost like a continuation to where it's now a conjoined force of electromagnetic power. So you have this buffer field coming ahead, that's a proton event, And then you see so you'll see a big increase of the proton flux upon impact, and that's your ESP, or energetic storm particle. Thank you, Deep Quick 9. Exactly. And so as you have that impact, you have your energetic storm particle that occurred. It gets sort of bouncing back and forth, very powerful with the imagine if you ever seen Mythbusters, and if you have a chance to go look it up, I would recommend looking up Mythbusters golf ball test. They shoot a golf ball down a tube that travels, and I think they're trying to break the sound barrier with a golf ball. What happens when they fail the test is a little bit of atmosphere gets into the vacuum of the tube, and you'll see the golf ball, as it reaches the end, starts doing a very quick, very volatile shaking back and forth. Ends up not breaking the flimsy tape at the end of the tube. That event is kind of similar to what's happening when these protons start hitting atmosphere. They become super energetic, super powerful, and we see this concentration of proton energy, and that is, in fact, the ESP, or ESM. No, ESP. ESP, sorry. A lot of acronyms. Energetic storm particle. And that's the second kind of proton events. So we have both that are occurring. And that's why the proton flux is so high right now. And that's why we keep seeing multiple increases. And so we have ESPs occurring. We have SPEs occurring. Both kinds of proton events. And we, of course, have the ICMEs. And then on top of that, we have the solar flares, which we see rapidly onset. So when you see it, that's when we're impacted, and it's passed. It travels at the speed of light. So I just wanted to mention that because that's one of the things I've been trying to figure out and study, and I finally have the answer I was looking for. Because I was seeing two specific types of proton events, but I did not know there were two different kinds. I figured it was an onset event that was launched on its own, but that's only one kind. The kind that's the ESP I did not know about until more recently, and so I started doing research trying to hyper-focus, figure out what is going on, because I believe that if I'm going to have something on the channel, I need to be able to explain it, or at least attempt to understand it enough that I can say this is what is happening, and this is what that means. Of course, I'd like to go much deeper, like I just did there, but for me, I feel like that if I can't explain what I'm showing, then I might as well not be showing it. It's just my strange frame of mind. But yeah, so that's what's going on. That's our current update. And we're seeing a continuation of activity, and I do expect that continuation to occur. The resolution of 3296 is developing, so activity and potential is resolving. And that doesn't mean activity is over at all. It is far from over. But the chance of a higher end position, that high X class or X class rather, or a proton event, those events, the potential of them is decreasing as each resolution occurs. So something to keep in mind, a little bit less each time as it resolves its polar discomforts. All right, well, I'm going to be making a video. I've already got most of it done. Just waiting on all the imagery for the 10th. Got to wait for the end of the 10th, and then for SDO's database to carry all the imagery for 8K resolution imagery to put to the finalization of the video. That'll probably take about a few hours post that point. And then I'm going to have a 8K resolution of the journey of this trio of regions, this love triangle of regions, as they rotate from approximately the 2nd of May through the 10th of May, end of the 10th of May. And that should be available hopefully tomorrow. So have an eye out for that. I have 171 right now looping as part of the rotation at the moment between 2nd to 9th. But that'll be a full video eventually once I get all the data. So that's the current update. I hope everyone's having a wonderful day. And cheers and science on.